So Matt and I are talking about Castrovilli versus Tonali. So you have two really interesting young Italian midfielders right now. The younger is Tonali at 20. Castro is 23 years old. Very young guys who are going to be in the Azzurri setup for years to come. So
Debut seasons in Serie A, though.
debut seasons.
Yeah, yeah.
And how do you fit both these guys in the midfield, right? Because, well, first let's talk about Tonali. What are his
Mhm.
defining qualities?
I mean, at first glance, everyone's going to look at him and think like he's a carbon copy of Pirlo. Of course, even if you're not even a football fan, you probably have some sort of knowledge of who Pirlo is, his aesthetic, the type of success he had for club and country. Of course, he was very influential for the Italian national team in their 2006 World Cup win. Obviously, he's going to still get those comparisons, not to mention the fact that he has the ties to Brescia, which, of course, Pirlo kind of came up through there before he actually moved around a little bit and then made that transition towards like a deep line playmaker, or what we call regista. Um, but there's a lot of there are some similarities, but I think the way Pirlo put it best, I think there was like a quote that there's some similarities between him and Pirlo. But there's also a lot of qualities that he sees in Tonali, in other players, other class players, in the sense I think he's a little bit more well-rounded in his skill set, and I think what he can offer. Obviously, if you look at the stats show that he is a player who can get forward. He's one of the top dribblers in terms of success rate per 90 and Serie A this season, which again speaks volumes to a player of his age who can do that. One, two, his debut season. Three, the fact that he really doesn't have a lot of support, so you can kind of get an idea that the Brescia manager does give him that license to roam and ultimately lets him kind of do whatever he pleases in the midfield, whether he sees fit. But I will say this: I think he's a player that could slide out towards like one of those Mezzala roles. I think ideally, I think most clubs that do go with him will probably, whether it be Juve, Inter, Milan, who's ever in for a signature, will probably try to deploy him a little bit deeper. I think ultimately that's where I think he'll find the most success. Now, that isn't to say that he can't be a player that thrives in maybe a double pivot, right? If let's say he's next to a more defensive-minded player, and we saw this many times with the Italian national team where, Gattuso was that defensive player, or it was De Rossi, and Pirlo would just kind of sit there, operate, and his head would be on a swivel, and he would just dictate the tempo and the pace of play. So when I look at Tonali, I think he's kind of like a jack of all trades midfielder. I don't think he's going to be a midfielder that gets a lot of goals, but I think you've seen from him and what he does and what he's capable of from set pieces. He had that great one, I think, against Genoa, that was like near like the touch line, and he pretty much curled it into the far post. So I think he's a midfielder that does bring a little bit of everything to the table, defensively, offensively, in terms of his passing of play and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you hit on there, and one is being well-rounded. I definitely agree. I see Tonali as a bit more rugged. He'll get into the
Yeah,
tackles. He doesn't
yeah, yeah,
really shy
yeah,
away. And he's athletic. Not that Pirlo's not athletic. They're just athletic in different ways,
yeah,
where Tonali is a bit more of like the modern footballer, for sure, and that kind of quintessential regista attributes. But then there's more, which is really interesting. And in my view, I do fear that he's going to replace Pjanic in this double pivot and just be super deadly with incredible players around him. And that's going to just unleash another 10 years of Juve
yeah.
midfield
Jeez, man, God
dominance.
help me.
uh, so it's really interesting. I don't know what his price is going to be like, because
Mm.
nobody knows what the market's going to be.
I have an
Um,
idea. I have an idea. I think Salino, obviously, he knows what he's gotten him. He knows when you start throwing in. There's a couple different elements, a couple different factors to his possible move, and I think ultimately what Salino, the president or owner of Brescia, will demand for him, and ultimately what big clubs will pay for him, right? Because I think you got to look at a team like Juve, who with Inter are probably the two favorites. I think he's probably going to stay in Italy. But I think there's going to be a little FOMO, fear of missing out, right? If, let's say, Inter kind of come up short in their bid, or Juve come up short in their bid, they don't want it to be Marco Verratti 2.0, where he was at Pescara, he was fantastic. Yes, he was a Serie B player, but you could kind of get a glimpse and an idea of what type of future he had in store. And then obviously, of course, the rest is history, right? He went to PSG. He's won so many league titles. He's won
yeah,
so many domestic cups. He's been very influential for the Italian
he's
national
making
team.
racks.
Right, he's making a ton of money on these contract renewals every year. I think his agent's Mino Raiola, so shout out to him. He's going to do a good job for him. But so I think ultimately, when I'm looking at fee for Tonali, a player of his caliber in the modern era, um, 40 million at least.
$40,
I
right?
really do that. And I also think what's going to factor in there, yes, Brescia are going to be relegated, assuming they have a complete turnaround if we do resume the season. But I think when you look at the fact that it would be a domestic sale, I think there's going to be teams that have to come up good with a really substantial offer,
Yeah.
both with the fee and with the wages. And I think at the end of the day, you may see something where they offer, 40 million for Tonali, and in exchange, Brescia get the opportunity to maybe scout one or two or get one or two of their youth players. Something
Yeah.
along the lines of that, which I've seen with many other clubs. So I think 40 to 50, as Roberto here is touching on, I think that's a pretty good valuation. It could be
The,
higher though.
the
I
number
don't
the
know.
number I had in my head was 40, and knowing Cellino, he's someone who always just is a bit of a character, and he
Yeah.
has a habit of just not selling out, right?
Right.
Not bending over.
Mhm.
So I could definitely see 40 plus, maybe like 40 plus 3, 5, whatever it is, plus bonuses.
I also think the fact that again we touched on his skill set and what he brings, but also the fact that he's got such a bright future already ahead of him, and I think it already for the national team. And I think when you throw the national team sort of build into them, I think that's a little bit more reassuring for teams that would want to spend that sort of money on him. Is that can you do it with the more pressure of the bigger stages? And I think, of course, in the couple appearances we've seen with Tonali for the national team, he's even added that too. So like I think he's one of those players that not only has the qualities in his feet and his boots and his body, but I think mentally he's got that sort of mindset, that sort of character, the mentality to understand where he's at. If it is a Juve, if it is an Inter, hopefully it's Milan. I don't think it's going to be. You can see in the background, but if it is at a big club like that, I think there's that sort of emphasis on having the mindset and to be able to handle that pressure. And I think he's also got that too, which is very important with all the pressure that comes with the fee and the wages we at least anticipate him
Mm.
going for.
Um, Roberto asked, "What do you think happens to Lautaro?" I don't want to spend too much time because we're making a bit of a denser video. I think he goes to Barcelona,
Yeah,
because that's his
yeah.
childhood dream. And if you get a chance to play for one of the best football playing sides in the world, I think you take it. Not that Inter isn't. I just think Barcelona is in a bit of
And you have to
a
play with
goal
Messi.
by itself. Yeah,
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 then
and
that's
play with
added bonus. You don't know
Messi.
how much longer
Yeah,
he's going to be there. Plus, I also think too, and I don't want to go too much on it, but I also think that is something that would maybe entice a guy like Messi to stay. I think there's been rumors that he would maybe consider making that other journey, similar to what Ronaldo did.
I
I don't
never
think
see it.
so.
I never see it.
I don't see it either. But I think that
Nah.
could be something to maybe appease him. Hey, we got Lautaro Martinez, and you're a fellow international. To kind of sweeten the pot there. But
I think he would
who really
destroy in
knows?
Spain.
Yeah,
He'd be
yeah,
an assassin out there. Like the guy
absolutely.
takes on Italian defenders like he doesn't care. So imagine what he would do in Spain where defenders
No, I
actually, the
100% agree
center
with you.
backs push up. Um, we have another counterpart though,
Castrovilli,
Castrovilli.
I love him.
How do you think his skill set is? How do you define that? Because he's a little bit different in my opinion. He's actually a lot a bit different.
Um, so yeah, Castrovilli's his kind of rise has been. I mean, I think comparing him to Tonali. I mean, Tonali was already like a big time prospect last year. I think coming into like once Brescia got promoted, everyone's like, okay, let's see how Tonali can play in Serie A with the big boys, right? And he's obviously passed that test with flying colors. But Castrovilli is a player who's bounced around in Serie B most of his previous years. I think it was Bari, it was Cremonese, if I recall the teams. So he's kind of been a largely unknown talent. I think maybe some who would watch him a little bit more closer than we do, maybe with the boots on the ground watching in those small stadiums, they may be able to say, hey, like this kid maybe has something if he can get an opportunity at the next stage. And sure enough, I
Hmm.
think eventually once Castrovilli was given regular minutes under Montella first, I think it started to really see the type of player he can be. And I think, the box to box player, he's great on the ball. He's got the vision. He can pass. I think he's also very good in the final third. I think he's got a lot more production to come in the final third. I don't think he's going to be a player that's, 2 goals, 3 goals, 4 assists. I think he's someone who can maybe bump it up and maybe be like a 7 to 8 goal player with maybe 10 assists, 11 assists. Someone like a Luis Alberto, maybe, if he
Hmm.
is in those advanced roles and provided he has the support around him to make those chances work. Because what we're seeing in year one with him, I think he's the real deal. And I don't know if they're going to sell him
Yeah, he's
after one
legit.
year. I think there's the possibility that Chiesa, if I had to choose one of the players that would leave the big jewel players that they do have, I think Chiesa would be definitely one. And I think Castrovilli could possibly stay another year. But I do like
Mm.
Castrovilli quite a bit. And I think the beauty about it is that we have. Sorry about that. The fact that we have all these young Italian national team midfielders to kind of praise, it's refreshing after so many
Yeah,
years
it's
of just
crazy.
Simone Pepe and all these guys who just weren't
Pepe.
Aquilani, like guys who just weren't cut to be like very influential players.
Different cloth.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really like Castrovilli for selfish reasons because I think he would be the perfect player alongside Diawara. Because like that I watch him and the way that he makes me feel is like I'm looking at a Spanish type player who's grown up in Italy, and that really reminds me of the national team in that they press more than
yeah,
traditional Italian teams with Catenaccio. And he has those quick feet, of course, to touch upon the ballet, which is such a cool story that he did as a child. And he's humble. He comes from Bari, which is a humble area, a good family kid, it seems. So I think he's got the mentality along with the physicality. And he seems to always get away from his opposition. Like he just pulls things out and he does back heels like a certain other player
you could see the
you
person
may have
when he
heard of
plays.
before.
You could see the personality when he plays. Like he's another player that I look at, and I think he's tailor made for a bigger club. I think it's crazy
Yeah.
to see that these players right now are year one, not even a full year into their right because of the stoppage. After just maybe mostly a full year, are able to be so expressive, have so much personality, and
Yeah.
just not be afraid to like push the envelope and do things against the conventional way of playing.
Yeah, which is cool. If you were him, one more year or do you get out?
I mean, nothing's guaranteed. I think we see with so many players, right, where they kind of stick around and then maybe they have an off year. I think
Ber-
Chiesa was one of those cases too, where I think he
Berardi.
wanted to Berardi. I think where they wanted to maybe move and whatever the case may be, it didn't work out. So now they're kind of in limbo. They don't have the same success the following year.
Yeah.
And injuries, right? We've seen it so many times where, like, I like Marco Reus is another example. I know he's wanted to stay at Borussia Dortmund, but he's a player that's always had the injuries, and you wonder and you question in your mind, well, what if I get an injury? Will that dream move be there for me? And that's
Yeah.
kind of something that has to play in your head. I think, we look at all the one club players in history, right? Like Maldini's, Totti's, that's crossed their minds at some point. We know that
Yeah.
does, and there's no putting down the size of any clubs, but like, Fiorentina, like if you have the opportunity to play for a team like Juventus with Ronaldo, a lot of these champions, a lot of these serial winners, it's very enticing, especially with the wages, especially the fact that you can secure that for your family as well.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, but
I
I
would
do
I would
think
be out. I
I do
would,
think
no doubt, I would be gone. If
I
they were
think
like, oh,
yeah,
you could play for Fiorentina another year, or you could go to a top 7 team, I'd be like, see ya. Fiorentina's a good team, and this new owner is very good. But
yeah,
the maximum he's going to do is he's going to keep them relevant. They're not going to crack the top 5.
no,
It's
and
just not
and
going to
and,
happen.
and as much as Comiso's been very ambitious, I think on the market, like Koame, they've got some nice players in there. They're not a team that's going to be kind of threatening for like top
No,
4, and they're a
they're not
Europa
getting
League
in.
max team
The
that I
market's
think
not big enough.
their market's not big enough, and I think ultimately they're a club that can make some noise, but I think they're a club that's going to have to rely on scouting to kind of be right in the thick of things. But at the end of the day, if they're able to keep producing those sorts of young players, I mean, we see it's right. They do a great job scouting players. Milenkovic, the central defender, is another one. So they got up front, what's his name?
They do pretty good.
Vlahovic. So like they
Yeah,
have a lot of
Vlahovic is
young
very
players.
good.
So they'll have no issues, I think. Replace. It's not. It's here's how it is, because it's kind of tied to Tonali and it's tied to Castrovilli, and really when a club that's kind of provincial, mid-table, sells a top premium player, it's not so much what you sell him for. It's how you spend the money that you recoup from him. And I think a team prime example is Cagliari. Like you sell certain players like Barella to Inter, a team that's competing for a Scudetto, and then you go out there and you replace him quite well, and you have a good season. You're able to kind of show that to your fans. It kind of eases the blow and the pain from letting such a good player go. And I think that's kind of what Fiorentina fans have to kind of look at it in that sense.
Yeah, and I agree there. And Joe asks about Bonaventura. Bonaventura is someone who's been linked a lot to Roma. I don't really know much about him because he's been really injured. It seems like the iron is not hot anymore. And, he's 30, going on 31. He's got multiple injuries. Would you be happy if he joined Roma?
I would. He's a player I like. He actually shares the same birthday as me, August 22nd, which is pretty cool. But he's a player I've always liked. I think he's been one of those very few players throughout this entire just catastrophic era for Milan fans everywhere. Very consistent, a very professional left winger, left mid. He's good on the ball. Just some seasons he just hasn't been able to stay completely healthy. But in the seasons that he was healthy, amidst all the chaos going around at the top and with the players and the coaching, he's been a player that's been able to stay, somewhat, consistent. And I think it's just ultimately you could get a player like him that goes to a team like Roma. He doesn't maybe play every game, but he's a player that the fans will immediately love. He could bring some versatility in the midfield. And I think he is a player that will ultimately stay in Italy and get an opportunity somewhere. I think Atalanta would be a good fit too. I think Champions League football
He's from there.
Goes back to the team he was at previously. So I like him. I just don't think that Milan should consider giving him another deal. And I just don't think they're going to, because he's a Raiola client. I think he wants too much, and I don't think Milan want to go in that direction.
Yeah, I don't foresee that either. Hey, Calcio guys. It's a weird one for me because I'm looking at VR and I'm looking at Veretout, Diawara, Cristante, and you have four players right there who play in the anchors. I don't see a space for him. What would he play? Left wing, attacking winger, substitute? Like,
I think that I don't think there would be an issue with him being kind of like not. I mean, I don't think it's tough for you as a player who's always started, right? He's a player that started all these years at Milan and was like kind of a fan favorite to go to playing a bench role. But I think at some point, like there's a trade-off. You can play consistently, but you maybe not playing at that size of a club, or you can play as a spark plug guy off the bench that Fonseca can use, and he can give you a good 15, 20 minutes and occasionally start in certain games. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He's 30. I think he has to understand that his situation is a little bit different, a little more difficult from him to demand like a starting role, but someone would give it to him. I just don't think a team would pay and commit to those wages knowing his injury record.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what his situation is. It's not like he's a player who's 29, 30, who, okay, there's kind of they're at an impasse with the contract extension. I'm going to leave. And he's got obvious talent. He's still on the better half of 30.
It's not Mertens.
No. Because Mertens has at least been healthy. When you're healthy and you're able to, you at least give yourself the opportunity to convince and to prove you are still up to it. But if you can't stay healthy, then you can't show anything. You're not available. That's just what it comes down to.
And it's so silly because one day I'm reading, Torino's in the lead to sign him, and I'm like, the lead? Like, okay. It's just such clickbait. You never know what's real, what's not. People are dying for advertising dollars.
It's quarantine rumors.
Yeah, quarantine rumors. It's a whole new escalation of nonsense out there. But this was really cool. I'm glad we got to talk about the differences and the similarities and where these two players are in their career. If you had to pick one, just quickly, Castro or Tonali for Milan?
Tonali. The reason why I say Tonali is because I think he's the type of player that can absolutely run a midfield for you. Like, he can completely revamp and retool and kind of improve a midfield more than I think Castrovilli could. In the sense that he's a player that if you stick him at the base now, for like in a hypothetical situation, if you threw him into Milan's midfield, you could do so many different things now. You could put Benacer as a mezzala, which a lot of people talked about. Frank Kessié is like more of your defensive-minded, a little bit more box-to-box type guy as well. And Tonali can sit deep. So you have a lot of balance in that midfield, but no one's really a liability. No one's really slow with the ball. Tonali is so well-rounded that I think ultimately the fact that he gives you that sort of versatility is kind of where I lean towards. And he's a player that I think is very good, and I think he can ultimately be very great in multiple positions. But I think the fact that he's so adept at playing deep in this kind of era of football, I think he can revolutionize a midfield and ultimately take a lot of other players along with him to another level.
I think that's expertly said. Uh, I would definitely agree for me, but because Roma has Diawara, I would go with Castrovilli
It
because I
depends
think
on
he
who you
would
got around
complement
you.
him. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it totally does. On that note, it was great to talk to you, Matt. I hope to see you soon,
absolutely,
even
man.
though we live 2 miles from each other, um,
Yeah, right.
coincidentally.
Yeah,
But thanks everyone for who tuned in. I'm going to post this on YouTube now. Ciao.
awesome. Take it easy, guys.